1945, while the embers of World War II were still smoldering in the European wilderness, Han van Meegeren was shoved into a Dutch prison cell. In the eyes of the public, he was no longer a man, but a soul-devouring monster. He faced the charge of high treason. In an era drenched in blood, this word was synonymous with the gallows. The evidence lay on the Allied command's desk. He had personally handed a masterpiece by Vermeer to the Nazi demon Hermann Göring. To the Dutch, he hadn't just sold a painting, he had auctioned off the last remains of a nation's dignity and soul. Van Meegeren sat in the dock, the shadow of the noose already brushing against his neck. He looked thin, humble, almost wretched, like dust crushed by the gears of history. But on the third day of the trial, this man looked up through a thick haze of cigarette smoke, a terrifying smirk flickering in his gray eyes. He spoke slowly, uttering a declaration that would collapse art history and distort the world's very perception of reality. You want to hang me because I sold a national treasure. But what if I told you the painting Göring cherished was never a Vermeer? He paused, his voice low and hollow, like a man digging his own grave. I painted it myself, stroke by stroke, in the pitch-black silence of my basement. At that moment, justice became a farce. The curtain rose on a dark parable of vanishing identity and the profound frailty of the human spirit.
To trick the most predatory and sophisticated eyes in the world, being a great painter was not enough. You had to deceive physics, chemistry, and even Father Time himself. Van Meegeren didn't hide in an attic waiting for divine inspiration. He was conducting an unholy laboratory dissection. He knew that the 17th century masters had locked their souls within layers of paint as hard as stone, a rigid shell formed by 300 years of oxidation. If you used modern linseed oil, the paint under a microscope would reveal a viscous, deceptive softness. A single swab of alcohol from a suspicious expert would dissolve the facade in an instant. So, in that cellar reeking of chemical reagents, he began his murder of time. Like a grave robber, he hunted for cheap, anonymous 17th century portraits. Then he cruelly stripped away their original souls with lye, until he exposed the ancient fabric that had breathed for 300 years, complete with its authentic pinholes and irregular antique edges. Next came the most lethal step. Into his ground pigments of lapis lazuli and vermilion, he injected a revolutionary secret poison, phenol-formaldehyde. This was the precursor to plastic. Like a chef tending the fires of hell, he shoved his finished works into a makeshift heating box, baking them at a constant 105 degrees Celsius for 2 agonizing days and nights. In that suffocating heat, the plastic polymerized and hardened instantly. In just 48 hours, he violently accelerated a process of decay and brittleness that naturally demands 3 centuries. But even this was insufficient. The scars of age had to heal real. Van Meegeren rolled the scorched canvas over a cylinder, manually snapping the surface into a spiderweb of craquelure. He listened as the paint emitted faint, shattered groans under his fingertips. Finally, he washed the entire painting in India ink, allowing the black fluid to snake down into every fissure, perfectly simulating the soot and dust of 300 years. As he used fine sandpaper to dull the last flickers of newness, the ghost of Vermeer woke up in that basement. In this man, you find no trace of his own style. His genius lay in his ability to make his self vanish entirely into those manufactured wounds.
Yet, the most flawless forgery remains nothing but scrap paper in a cellar, without a perfect victim. Van Meegeren wasn't painting at random. He was tailoring a hallucination for one specific man. That man was Abraham Bredius, the undisputed global authority on Vermeer, the unquestioned pope of art connoisseurship. Bredius had spent his life defending a highly controversial academic hypothesis. He was convinced that in the dawn of his career, Vermeer had been influenced by the Italian Caravaggio school and had painted a series of grand, divine religious masterpieces. But decades had passed, and without evidence, his theory was becoming a laughingstock in the academic world. For this 83-year-old man, desperate to solidify his historical legacy before death, evidence had become his only oxygen. Van Meegeren sensed this hunger, a lethal visual blind spot born from intellectual arrogance. He didn't paint a girl with a pearl earring or a quiet Dutch interior. Those subjects were too familiar, too likely to trigger suspicion. Instead, through a cruel psychological calculation, he fed Bredius exactly what he craved, a previously unknown religious epic with heavy Italian influence, the Supper at Emmaus. When this painting was placed before Bredius, the old man surrendered completely. In that moment, he didn't see chemical pigments or antique canvas. He saw the ultimate triumph of his life's work. His magnifying glass trembled as it traced the manufactured fissures, and as his nose caught the scent of phenol resin masked by ancient mold, he somehow read holiness in those fraudulent strokes. He signed his name on the certificate with shaking hands and declared, "This is the masterpiece of Johannes Vermeer. No, this is the will of God." Once the god of art critics had spoken, the world's reason suffered a total paralysis. At this moment, the truth was no longer relevant. When a man's academic reputation is tied to a lie, he ceases to be an objective observer and becomes the forgery's most loyal protector. Bredius's endorsement became Van Meegeren's bulletproof vest. From that moment on, the deception born in a dark basement was officially canonized as the absolute truth of the art world.
Yet, Bredius's praise was only the beginning. The true storm descended in 1940 as the iron boots of Nazi Germany crushed the Dutch borders. In those dark years, art was no longer mere aesthetics. It was the spoils of power. Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring, the second most powerful man in the Nazi regime, was a pathological collector. He was a gluttonous beast, scavenging across Europe for the finest masterpieces, attempting to mask the barbarism of the Nazi regime with stolen cultural refinement. For Göring, owning a Vermeer was not just a symbol of wealth, it was the ultimate medal of his identity. Van Meegeren watched all of this with a cold, calculating gaze. He realized that this predator, blinded by the lust for plunder, was even easier to deceive than Bredius. Göring's greed meant he didn't care for the truth of the brushstroke. He only cared for the certificate signed by the Pope, Bredius. Thus, Van Meegeren cast his most expensive bait, a forgery titled Christ with the Woman Taken in Adultery. The scene reached a peak of absolute absurdity. The Nazis had plundered the riches of all Europe, yet Van Meegeren used the plastic trash manufactured in his basement to swindle the gold they held so dear. To possess this Vermeer, Göring handed over 137 previously looted paintings in exchange. It was a gamble of vanity and evil, two equally dark souls conducting a transaction across a distorted reality. Göring believed he had captured the soul of the Netherlands, unaware that he was carrying back to Berlin a rotting hallucination, baked in an oven and soaked in chemical reagents. In that moment, Van Meegeren was no longer just a forger. He was a master puppeteer manipulating a demon from the shadows. He exploited the Nazis' pathological longing for civilization to execute the greatest revenge in art history. In 1945, with the collapse of the Third Reich, Allied forces discovered Göring's private collection in an Austrian salt mine. Amidst the mountain of looted treasures, this Vermeer stood out. Following the trail of transaction records, investigators quickly zeroed in on Van Meegeren. He was locked in a death cell, charged with the unpardonable, collaboration and high treason. In those scarred years, desperate to purge the remnants of Nazism, no one wanted to hear a traitor's defense. The judge told him plainly, unless he could prove the painting was a fake, the gallows would be his only destination. And so, the most absurd scene in art history unfolded. To verify his mad ramblings, the court actually erected an easel in his cell and placed him under 24-hour police surveillance. Before the eyes of the very judges, officers, and journalists waiting to witness his guilt, this thin man lit another cigarette and picked up his brush. For 6 weeks, under the gaze of a skeptical world, Van Meegeren once again summoned the ghost of Vermeer. He skillfully mixed his hazardous resins, precisely repeating the alchemy he had performed countless times in his basement. When the final forgery, the young Christ in the temple, took shape, the room fell into a deathly silence. At that moment, a nation's hatred instantly transformed into ecstasy. The traitor who had supposedly sold his soul became overnight the hero who swindled a demon. The public realized he hadn't sold a national treasure,
he had sold plastic trash and received real Nazi gold in return. He was the genius who had humiliated Göring from the shadows. And for the critics who had once mocked him, this painting was the loudest slap to their faces. From the dock, he issued his final mockery. If these paintings could fool every expert and provide the world with masterpiece-level awe, then were they great art or merely brilliant lies?
Han van Meegeren died of a heart attack shortly after his trial, leaving behind a wound in art history that has never truly healed. In the end, his entire life became a satire of the human aesthetic system. People had stood before his forgeries, weeping at the divine brushwork and unreachable genius of Vermeer. Yet, the moment the truth was revealed, those same people turned away, cursing the paintings as cheap plastic trash. This forces us to confront a deeply disturbing question. Is the value we worship in art found in the soul flowing across the canvas, or merely in the glittering name carved upon the frame? If a painting can deceive the world's elite experts and provide a state of aesthetic ecstasy, does the beauty it carries die the instant the fraud is exposed? Van Meegeren revealed a nightmare reality. The art world is often a ghost ship sailing on a sea of vanity. Experts care not for beauty, but for their own authority as the gatekeepers of truth. The powerful care not for art, but for the prestige that decorates their dominance. These monsters, born from the sleep of reason, still wander among us today. Han van Meegeren had no style of his own. He lived as a perfect hollow vessel, occupying the shell of another. He used one lie to dismantle a much larger lie. He used a single deception to humiliate the arrogance of an entire era. He died a hero and a ghost who had successfully vanished into the cracks of his own creations. Thank you for watching this journey into the abyss. I am curious, if you discovered that your most precious memory or your favorite masterpiece was built upon a perfect lie, would that beauty collapse in your heart instantly? Is truth truly more important than the feeling itself? Let me know in the comments. If you appreciate this kind of narrative that unearths the truth from the shadows of history, please give this video a like. It helps more people lost in the mists of reality find this story. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. Here, we do not peddle myths. We take you through the facade to gaze at the forgotten, cruel, yet authentic souls. Every like and subscription is a massive support for us to continue creating deep dive content. Thank you for your company. I'll see you in the next shadow.